Chandra. I'm the president of the American Institute for Indonesian Studies, AFIS. AFIS is a consortium of 25 research universities in the US, all of which have faculty members who are very interested in doing research on Indonesia across the disciplines, from history and geography and economics and political science, all the way to some of the natural sciences, including zoology and biology and so on, and medicine. One of the main missions of the American Institute for Indonesian Studies is to promote the study of Indonesia among scholars in the United States. And attached to that mission is to support colleagues in Indonesian universities to enhance their research capacity as well, so that we can develop some collaborations between Indonesian and American scholars. For those of you who follow trends in publishing, if you publish with an international collaborator, your work is much more likely to get read by more people, to get cited by more people. So there are some very tangible benefits that come from these international collaborations. The other benefit, of course, which is probably more important, is that when people come from different parts of the world and share their ideas, usually the result is better than what it would be if just one individual from one part of the world was trying to write. So what we're going to do today is we have a number of experts. We have, I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 who are scheduled to talk. They have expertise in different subjects. We have Carol Mitchell from the Library of Congress, which is probably the largest, is it the largest library in the world? It is the largest library in the world. If you can't find something in some other place, there's a good chance you'll find it in the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. She heads the Library of Congress's operations in Southeast Asia, and the headquarters is in Jakarta. So she has very kindly come all the way from Jakarta just for today for this session. She's going to talk about identifying good journals for publications. Following that, Dr. Paul Kratoska, who has significant experience as a publisher and editor of journals, academic journals, is going to talk about current trends in academic publishing. And then following that, we'll have a break, and I'll mention the names of the speakers after the break. So let's start by welcoming Carol Mitchell from the Library of Congress to talk about identifying good journals for publishing.
And following me, there's the publisher's perspective. So I'm responsible for giving you a little handout here. Some of you have spent some time learning about academic publishing in major journals. I'm going to talk a little bit about providing an area studies perspective, because I'm an area studies specialist. Southeast Asia is the area I've researched. I joined the University of Northern Illinois University, and I've worked at the University of Wisconsin in Madison as a Southeast Asia specialist, buying books and journals for their students like yourselves or faculty. So that is my background. Okay, so I'm going to just talk about how we in the U.S. the traditional area studies, and it's in flux right now. It's area studies has always been a little bit different. It's multidisciplinary, and I'm using it as my area of context because that's my background. But some of what I'm going to be talking about, you'll be able to apply to whether you're in a discipline, doing a traditional discipline of political science or sociology. It would fit into this area as well, and it would fit in if you're going to be looking at a policy research versus research, and there are fine distinctions that maybe you've gone over in the past. So when you're writing for a broad international journal, you want to take, some of them will take disciplinary approaches when you're looking at things. Some will take a broader area. Some will take a geographical approach, some will be policy studies. So one of my big emphasis is know where, throughout the day, I'll be coming and returning to know what you want to do and where you want to publish and who your target audience is. because what you write for will make a difference. This is my plug for libraries. In libraries in the US, and I know that there's a movement here in Indonesia, librarians have specialists. So you may have an engineering librarian who has an engineering background, law librarians are lawyers, and people like me have advanced degrees in the region in which we're an area studies specialist. So I did my work on Malaysia. And the librarians play a great role in determining the collections. Unlike here, the faculty tend to be a little more, you may ask for, of course, faculty are always asking for materials, but we're also very independent to go out and look for materials and purchase on our own. Most every big research library will have an area study specialist, especially if they have. So you would have East Asia specialist, South Asia specialist, so they're big chunks of the world, and then the universities in the US, you would have also Southeast Asia studies people. What we do is although libraries have changed significantly, the physical space of a library remains very, very important. Most of the collections from this region are not available online. You know, so the big collections in the US at the Library of Congress, at Northern Illinois University, at Cornell University, or Harvard, they're all books and journals that have not yet that are not yet available online. So the libraries as a physical place remain vital to who we are and how we study. And I think this is true particularly if you're doing historical research or in your theoretical background. Your library is still very, very vital to what you are. And I think they're also they're a good symbol of the importance your university will place on research. The libraries, people come to the research university in the US because of that library. So a good research library will support, not only it will support its faculty, its students, and it will be like a beacon out into the world that they care about research. So that's kind of my little flag to wave to you to make sure you support work and the development of your research institution here at Gajah Mada. They're very important to Gajah Mada and the future of research in the collections. Sciences tend to be far more digital. As any of you working in the medical and that, you do have more access to digital data and that. I do know that librarians here are very interested in how to get more data to people like you, and I'll go a little bit more into that later of what something's going on. And actually I gave some open data sources on your little list here. And including the Badan statistic, it's amazingly good data. So if you need data, the Badan statistic is quite good on that. So most of your libraries now through your research institutes now get full text journals. You have reference materials that are in electronic format nowadays. A lot's available, but don't forget, a lot is not. Don't just rely on your e-pages or your digital pages when trying to do background work for your research or for finding out what journals you might want to publish in. Make sure you double check on things that aren't online. I think the idea of indexes and bibliographies is gone now that we have full text searches. But if you're doing manuscripts, I think you'll still find those old catalogs of books where they just make lists of manuscripts or lists of things. They're still in your libraries and they're still very important. Those have not been digitized, and many manuscripts or materials are not available online. numeric databases, again, your local Badat statistic office, I would assume, has pretty good things. They also sell digital statistical data. If you think about it, we as librarians are the original aggregators. So a database like EBSCO that you probably use, or some of the other databases that you use, those are aggregators, and so are libraries. So they will house the whole range of knowledge from everything to everything. They'll have everything you want, and if not, you should pressurize your university to make sure you have the full range of it. Libraries are very expensive, which makes them hard to do. They're very expensive to maintain and keep and do work in. While there's a lot of serial vendors out there and aggregators that you'll start looking at, Paul will talk a little bit more about of how to when you're looking. These companies have the rights to, they buy up and they distribute journals. So they may buy up a journal here, they may buy up a journal there. And then they retain that right to distribute that journal back. So that's how those big electronic journals work. These aggregators are very expensive. Our libraries now spend about 15% of a multi-million-dollar budget on these big electronic databases. So in a country like yours, it can eat up a lot of your flexibility in buying books, just books about Indonesia and that. But discovering materials in these big databases can be very, very easy. When I was in school, we tended to look at the individual journal title. So when you're in one of these big aggregator databases and you do a search, which if you're a good searcher, you know your Boolean search, you know how to search, you say, no, I don't want this, I do want that. So you can do a good search and maybe come up with 50 articles. But you don't necessarily care about where those come from. So part of it is learning to go a little bit deeper and understand that those journals are not just, those articles that you're reading exist within a journal that has a theme, that has an editorial board, that has peer review of different things. So you're not just, it's like a headlet, you know, when you're looking at these big aggregators like EBSCO or even when you go into the old Garuda portal, and now that's on this deck, is you're seeing the article, but you're not looking at the context in which that article exists. So don't forget to take a step back if you're finding lots of good articles and find out where they're published. It's important if you're doing a journal article, because you're going to be scoping out what journals you like to read and where you want to put your article. Whether it's an Indonesian journal, a regional journal, or an international journal, understanding where that article is in the context of your research is very, very important. So here in Indonesia, most of your journals are printed with grants, so they're free and very difficult for libraries to collect. But now that there's a portal, Garuda, you can read 5,000 journals online. Journals in Southeast Asia, about Southeast Asia and for Southeast Asia, I'm making the assumption here again, some of your research will be about the location in which you know the best, Southeast Asia. So it's very difficult to know and document. I think Paul's done a little bit more on documenting how many titles there are here. What we get varies greatly at the Library of Congress, varies greatly year to year. A publication may come and 2 years later it's no more. A new one starts and we don't know about it. It's very, very difficult to find out about journal publishing here in Southeast Asia. Online guides are useful. Your universities all have it. There are ways of discovering them, but it's very time time consuming to find out about it. Some of the best journals in places to find the e-publishing of journals here that are trustworthy. Again, in Southeast Asia, there is what is called the predatory, where they take your money and they'll publish something at great expense. And there's a couple outfits like that. You can get a little bit in trouble for just naming them because they'll come after you. But there are some. Be careful about where you publish, and because there is this, and I'm sure they'll go into that. But the portal Garuda is vetted, so it is, anything there is looked at, it's moved to Ristek. Now it used to be someplace else, and there's 5,000 titles there, and those would be pretty much all of your universities, from the smaller Staines and the UINs up to the big, like here at UGM and other places. LIPI has a portal that still is maintained. LIPI tends to be a little bit different in its emphasis. There is also in Indonesia, there's a biodiversity e-journal portal. So that's a specialized small one if you're doing environmental work. So there are these places where you can look for journals, both if you're interested to look at it. Most of them you can search by article level as well as journal level. So if you hear about a journal you want to look at, you can search the title level as well as at the article level. ASEAN has started a citation index that would be more regional in its approach. It's added, since I talked in March, over 100 journals to that. So they're working very hard to go out after journals and make a regional scientific. They tend to be a little more scientific than social sciences and humanities. Malaysia has My Journal. I thought that was kind of cute. If because My is, the MY is there, so that's kind of cute on that. And they have about 550 titles. So again, if you're looking in literature or you're looking in a particular area, that is some place to look. Finding research like what you're doing is always a very good, you want to make sure it's original. Are other people doing it? What's their take on something in a different country? I've not found anything quite as good. The Philippines has commercialized theirs, and it's really not as very as good. It's smaller and not quite as robust as some of the other areas doing this. So in all of these countries, their higher education commissions have been very active in getting these started. I didn't include Thailand because most of the journals there are probably not in your languages that you could read. So the other is if you go to the top universities, go here, all of them will have a portal to the journals they have. So those are sort of entries into finding where the journals are, and they can, reasons to use your open source journals, they are open. And I think the countries that I've cited, I think you can all be very proud of Indonesia and take pride of the fact that you have such an open source publishing. Indonesia's always been quite open in what it publishes. I think the government in its sponsorship believes that what it sponsors is there. And the electronic medium has made it possible. Most of you at your universities will also have something behind the wall, what we would call your firewall, and that would be your dissertations will be there. So look at those. And most of your universities, the rectors have a fund that they give out money. And when they give out that money, they have to publish something. And I've seen absolutely amazing research come from that. They used to be published in print, and they were kind of pastel colors. I call them the pastel reports. But they're increasingly in electronic format, and they're behind firewalls. So you have to be part of UGM to look at it, or your respective journals. But they're amazingly detailed local things, everything from ecosystems to ecosystems of languages It's very, very good research but very localized. So it tends to look at, and if your rector gives university money and hands that out to the professors, maybe you've been a recipient. Business models, it covers the whole gamut of topics from policy, tends to be more policy oriented than strictly the research, but it is good and very useful. We've collected quite a bit from these, but again, as things have shifted to the non-print, it's harder for us to get them because they're behind their firewalls, and universities are reluctant to open those up. The e-journals allow you to discover so then they're good for just finding out what your research is. They can find out, look up your colleagues. You can do good name searches if you know somebody who's doing research in your area. Look that up. If you have a favorite professor, look that up. Find out, see the quality of work they're doing. Look at journals, whether you're EBSCO and your international ones or your local Garuda one. They're very, very good to be able to get an understanding of what journals are looking for, and that all of your journals here are very good about publishing how to submit and kind of what they're looking for. So they're very good about that, not so good about how to subscribe. You can look to their how to review for publication. Like I said, they're very good at that. It gives you a good understanding of what the cutting edge is, who's doing what in the region. You might get ideas from somebody doing in Malaysia and say, wow, that would apply here. And then it also helps your colleagues as you look at what they do and support their research as well. And I have on the bottom, but there's warnings. Again, be careful about the predatory journals as you're out there looking. They all begin with the word international, right? They will all have the word international, and they will all sound absolutely exactly what you want. So just be careful. And I hope you'll address that a little bit more. Yeah, so I think that's for young scholars anxious to get out there in the world, it's the biggest risk, and you can lose lots of money. So he'll tell you more on that. Here's the top Southeast Asia journals in I got it wrong. I put the NUS journal on the international one, not the regional, but I got it. Last time I forgot it. These are international ones. They would be covered. They're published all over the world. You have, maybe I couldn't decide whether because you're Cambridge, are you NUS or are you Cambridge? Some of these big ones, the Journal of the Siam Society is a respected, these are the top ones. I have to go. You have the Brigade. You have the Brigade in Indonesia is Cornell, but I understand you're saying he's not in Scopus, Indonesia, from Cornell. The Journal of Asian Studies is considered by some to be a pinnacle. Journal of Burma Studies. These are all published outside of the region. You have SOAS, the School of Oriental and Asian Studies in London doing this. These are all big international journals that are probably for Asia at the top. I'm sure I've missed some, but at least I have NUS in there this year. For Southeast Asia, which would maybe on some, I think these are just as exceptional in my mind. They're very, very good journals that are regional, very well respected. Again, most of these are all in English. Some of them are different topics. Again, the UI is now with Taylor and Francis. The Bulletin of Indonesian Economic Studies is a very respected journal of economic studies. The MBRS from the Malaysia branch does a good historical and what used to be called natural history. The Singapore Tropical Geography. Sojourn is another, a social science. There's a new one, Southeast of Now is a new one out of Singapore on contemporary art, sort of the first academic art one coming out of the region. And then there are good ones, there are very good journals in the region, so I also encourage you to look in that direction as well. So now kind of on to what I do when I look for journals. I think this is how, when we look at a journal, I reject probably about a third of the journals that I look at. I reject them for a number of reasons. I look at the reputation in the country or the region. So an UGM one I will buy all UGM and I will buy all UI ones. Maybe not the graduate school ones, but even those I might consider because they might have somebody who you'd be able to trace the evolution of their thinking. So I look at I look at where the institution from which that journal comes from. In Indonesia, I look also geographically. I want to make sure I'm getting journals from across the region. So I don't want to miss out, even though it might not be the best journal, I certainly don't want to miss out on East Java or Jayapura or something out of Sulawesi. So when I'm looking at a journal, I will also consider where it's published, in addition to who publishes it. Is it published regularly? Journals in Southeast Asia are very, very regular. So if you're thinking that you're disgusted because you're not published and you want to start a journal, please continue it. If one of the main reasons the question I always ask is, do we believe it's going to publish a second issue even? So I look at that, is it regular? Because if it's not regular, it means it has a weak administrative and it doesn't have a good reputation, it hasn't gotten off the ground enough. So I look at those. I look at the broader context of theoretical versus local content. For Indonesia, I wave the flag for your publishing or any local publishing because of its local context. As you move to doing international publishing, some of that will disappear. So I strongly urge you to look at perhaps revising and adapting for a local market, because if you're writing on Eastern Indonesia, it might be well to have that available to people in Indonesia. And if it's published in one of your local journals, it will reach it'll reach high school students perhaps because of the portal Garuda. So do consider sort of reworking, and I think we talked in my last one about how it is possible to take an article and put more local context back into it. Think about I look at topics and disciplines. We will get all the multidisciplinary ones. Southeast Asia is weak on art, so when we saw that new art journal, we were very quick to pick it up, as were the places in the US. So we tend to look at what the topics are. Is it represented? Is it repetitive? In Indonesia, the biggest area I reject are Islamic studies, because every university has 2, 3, or 4 Islamic studies journals. I can't get them all. So, I have to look. If it's well covered, I'm looking for the best or the strongest. I might get an UN one over another one. So I do look at how many, if there's 100 journals just like that out there, I won't get it. Titles that have long-term value that I look at new, we're seeing less of. So Gatra still remains very important. Tempo is very important to libraries across. So those sort of sources we'll always get. So again, that would be, we get lots of lifestyle. Those are important for research. So, looking at women, if you're doing women's history, you have to have women's lifestyle magazines, bride magazines, and things like that. Otherwise, how do you know what women were reading and what they were cooking? Lifestyle magazines are very important. We don't do much anymore in organizational newsletters. Those tend to be online. But the collections do have them. We have the ministry newsletters and things like that. So they are important and we do look at them. I look at the indexing and availability. Nowadays with the e-journals, that's not a big problem. So, but again, and now with open source journal publishing, that's not an issue as it used to be when they put them online themselves. So kind of then, what else do I look at when I have a journal in hand? And I, he'll probably go a little bit. When I'm looking at journals, thinking of those other larger kind of big meta factors, I look at the actual journal. Does it look at all good? I mean, do they have editing errors? If they can't spell development, I'm gonna, and believe me that if you can tell, a good editor is important. So if there's problems, does it look nice? Believe me, a journal that looks nice and is appealing and has got good margins, and even if it's online, is it readable? Is it easy to read? Do your eyes get tired reading it? That's important. Again, the repetitive. Does the journal actually write to its target audience? That's an important factor for me. If I'm getting a journal of development studies and it turns out not to have any, anything on development and is kind of strayed from its original path, then I might quit. We don't like to quit in the middle of the journal, but I might quit. Again, editing errors. Who are the editors? Are they from different universities, or is it all just somebody from the same department? We tend to not like all people from the same department. So, the exception would be graduate school journals where you're learning on some of that. Is it too broad? Is it too broad of its mission? Does it really, if it's so broad that it really doesn't have any, Journal of Indonesia could be a little bit difficult. I put at the bottom citations. I think sometimes we neglect to think about that. As librarians, we look at citations. And often the first place I go is to the back of a book or back of an article. Do they even know how to make a citation, much less the content of those citations? You'll discover that some journals limit citations and limit the footnotes you're allowed to put in just because of space issues, so you're condensing. So understand that one. But do know that your citations matter. And getting them wrong matters again and again and again. Again, if you're talking about these, they look at citation and they look at impact. If you make a mistake in your citation, it's a dead end. And believe me, and be careful when you're citing, and I hope that they go over this in the writing class on citing, URLs, because if they're not a permanent URL, that can be difficult. In libraries now, they will put a permanent URL on it, so make sure you're looking for that permanent. The World Bank will have a permanent URL. ADB will have a permanent URL. Use those citations. But use good citations. So, and again, some of the people I know and admire the most in academia are walking bibliophiles. I think we have one in the room, Dr. John. You walk up to them and they just can name off a book and they'll name off this author. And if you have a professor like that, use that professor. Always use that professor. They are valuable in your life. People who know their field and know the readers. I was just thinking maybe I should get some people, and maybe even you, the top 10 books you've read this year, the top 10 people who know, oh, I just found this good book, you'll want to read this. Oh, I saw this, please go read that. Those are the most valuable people you can learn and become that kind of person, because you are very much appreciated if you can guide your fellow human beings in the morass of publishing and where to find things. So just learning how to do your citations and give your citations and doing that is something that will be passed down from generation to generation, and people, it's a passion, and you either catch it or you don't, but you can learn it too. So a little of my advice is, know your target journals, know your journals. That's, again, that bibliophile. Know where you want to write, know who your audience is. Again, review your work outside of your peers. Before you even get to that next stage, have a coffee. I think they talked about this last time, having a coffee and doing it in a safe space, having people read it. Because once you move to the referee, it's not so safe anymore. And you might not like what they say, but you'll be prepared for criticism and from more friendly sources. Learn them. Write for that journal that you want to write for. Gear it towards what they want. You're not going to get accepted in an art journal if you're writing about science. But if you're writing about the intersections of science and art, you might. So write for what they want, and don't, and learn that. Be prepared for your rejections and read why, and learn. And if you're rejected, take it to somebody and ask them why you were rejected, and be ready for that. I think academia is not necessarily a love fest and a friendly place. It can be disappointing, and you can be disappointed. But you will grow from that rejection, and you will grow and learn more on that. Know the efficiency of a journal, and if you send something off and they have a reputation of waiting a year, maybe you don't want to write to that. Are they going to reply to you? If you send off an email, did they reply? Well, think about it. You can reject journals too. Don't forget, you have that power too. You don't have to, you have the power. Just consider your own well-being, and that you can reject that journal as much as it can reject you. If they're not meeting your needs of authorship, you are the author. You have that power to do that. And also know your legal rights. What are you selling when this gets into that predatory? What are you selling when you sign that piece of paper? What are you allowed to do? How, are you allowed to do anything with that? And I'm sure that we'll get a little bit more into that. Also know your rights if you're receiving outside funding. Increasingly, some funders may say that to publish with us first, or you have to do this, or you have to do that, or you might not be able to take your research someplace else. So know, if you're getting outside funding, know your rights there. In other words, you are an author, and you have rights. So know those rights and use them. At the same time, know that other authors have rights, and be careful about using authors' works. Be very careful about that. If you're in a highly reputable journal and you're not doing appropriate citations to the original authors, or you're not finding their works, they have legal rights too. So be careful about citing. Be careful about using works that are on illegal sources. Some of these scholarly resources, we don't collect from them because they're third party and they might not be original. So be careful collecting and writing from non-original sources. Some of these I'm sharing my research sources. Be careful about citing from those. They might not, whether you're caught or not, but be careful on that. So again, I'm going to kind of close and why you want to support your research institutions and why you want to support libraries as part of those research institutes. You get higher quality research when your research institutions are reputable. They get more money. It's a little circle of life that a good research institution is able to attract money and is able to support more people. It's a good research institution and a good library can help you with your research output. Good research institutes help recruit good students and good faculty. People go to Harvard and people go to these big schools, not just for the professors, but also for their research libraries. So just remember that supporting where you are today is really important. The people who are supporting you, turn around and support that as well. So that kind of brings me, I think, we're going to go right on through and let Paul